Today I'm going to be talking about the narrative structures that underpin software teams and how we can metaphorically repurpose fiction writing techniques to reshape our team's narrative structures. Narrative is how humans make sense of the world. We use stories as a way of fitting the chaos of our everyday experience into a pattern that is rememberable, that feels meaningful, and crucially, that feels alterable. Everyone on our teams tells themselves stories. And these stories aggregate. That flickering test that just won't die, people compare notes on it. And then another test begins to flicker, and two things is enough for the brain to make a pattern. Slowly, the team forms a consensus perspective that the test suite is flaky and unreliable. And then the team will start shaping its code in response to that narrative. Now, this could go on a few different ways. Could go positive. They could take a week to play bug smash in the test suite and fix the problems and get reliable tests again. But it could also go in another direction entirely. The team could decide, oh, the tests aren't going to give us reliable feedback, so why write tests? Or, gosh, we've got to do layer after layer of defensive coding because we can't trust anything here. At that point, we move from a situation where the team is shaping the code to a situation where the code is shaping the team. The team that did a bug smash and got reliable tests will feel confident in their code, will feel confident in their ability to fix its problems. So we get a self-reinforcing cycle of, here is this problem. We know how to solve it. We will fix it. Another problem. We'll fix this one too. But the other team has a mindset of distrust, and that mindset will kill them. Because if you don't have reliable tests, you can't refactor. And so tech debt will build up. It'll feel possible to play whack-a-mole with bugs and impossible to fix their root cause. The smallest possible change will start to seem like adding the same logic in 10 places, lest the existing code be disturbed and the whole edifice come tumbling down. This team's code is shaping them into paralysis. The stories a team tells itself, and the work the team does, and the technical systems that form that team's environments are always engaged in constant feedback loops with each other. Any system that has feedback loops in will accelerate in a direction. So the question is, how do we set up the right feedback loops? If the team's momentum is in the wrong way, how do we change it? This talk is about how we can use narrative as a lever in that work. So first, let's look at the most common story we tell ourselves in software development, that predictable delivery of new features is the core of the work, and that our project management practices must center that. Now, I'm not actually against estimations. Marketing needs to know when to do a media buy. And estimations are a little too obvious a thing to joke about in a talk about software engineering and fiction. Hard crowd. There we go. What I am against is the assumption that specific features are our most important deliverable. Software is unique in that we build towers out of Legos, but we also build the Legos themselves. Figuring out which Lego pieces we need to build is a hard problem. We usually mess it up. Which words do we need? Which sentences? Which chapters, as it were? And the best way I've found to sort out what's necessary is whether it helps the team or the code base or both get more capable. Capability isn't just about being able to meet users' current needs more effectively. It's also about being more able to meet their future needs. If a project makes you capable of doing the next project more easily, then you are setting up a positive feedback loop. If not, you are inevitably setting up a negative one. So here's our fiction writing checklist for today. Let's talk about how world building, plot, character development, and editing can all inform our roadmap planning in a way that lets our teams become more capable. Now, when we talk about world building, we mostly visualize projects like The Lord of the Rings. We think about a lone genius sequestering themselves away and building a detailed environment, nailing down every detail of its geography and languages and history. but world construction and storytelling are subtly different. This is a programming conference, and we're all nerds here, so I'm not expecting quite as normal a sample as I might get with this question, but I'm still curious. Raise your hands if you've read The Hobbit. Okay, now leave them up if you've read The Silmarillion. And yeah, I noticed a bunch of hands went down. If you haven't even heard of The Silmarillion, don't feel bad. It's a deep cut. There's a reason no movie was made of it. It is basically Tolkien doing an encyclopedia of all the world-building details that didn't make it into the main books. I'm the sort of person who reads textbooks for fun. And so I tried with The Silmarillion, I really did. I could not. In order to talk about what world building looks like in the context of telling a story that I personally would want to read, let's look at what science fiction grandmaster Samuel Delany has to say about it. Delany is the author of numerous classics of science fiction, probably best known for his novels Babel 17 and Dahlgren. Babel 17 is a lot easier if you want to go read it. Dahlgren's complicated. Delany also wrote numerous essays in which he took science fiction seriously as literary critic, which in the 70s was quite controversial. In his essay, about 5,750 words, Delany engages with how the underlying language patterns of science fiction differ from those of conventional literary fiction, and the role those language patterns play in establishing distinct speculative words for the reader. I am feeling a little bit woof up here. It's actually not that hard to remember. It's amazing. Anyway, one section of Delany's essay takes a close reading of the sentence, "The red sun is high, the blue low," which Delany calls out as a uniquely science fictional sentence. Delany looks at how our visual picture of the story's world changes as we read each new word in the sentence. At first, we just see the word "the," which is kind of a gray blob. It could mean anything. Then the word "red" appears. Our blob has a color. Then the word "sun," and finally we have a noun. We know what the red thing is. We think about all the contexts in which we might see red suns. We think, oh, this is probably something like a sunrise or a sunset. Then "is," which doesn't change the world much, and "high," which only changes a little. It's a little strange. We were thinking of a sunset, but maybe it's like just starting to be sunset. We also have comma, so we stick a pin in that idea. Next, another gray blob. And now the word "blue," so this blob has a color too, and the adjective "low." We don't know what our blob is, but we're pretty sure we know where it is. But then comes a period. That period means no new noun is coming forward to be blue. That period means that the low blue thing is another sun. We have two suns. That single period has turned our world on its head. All of a sudden, we move out of our normal world, and we're on Tatooine or something, staring across the desert at, again, our two whole suns. Whoa. That single period has recontextualized everything that came before it. Sometimes it does not take that much to change our entire mental model, to change all of the story we're telling ourselves, the story we're creating alongside an author as we read, or alongside our teammates as we work together. Note that we can play with how this picture is formed by changing up word delivery order, as it were. If we start with knowing that we're talking about a sun, then we let the reader understand a lot more about the world up front. And then the red bit is just a tweak. Working gradually makes the shift to a full Tatooine less jarring. When you think about it, there's something tremendously waterfall about the Tolkien way of going about world building. Something a little over-engineered. In fiction, world building often isn't about building a realistic world. That's usually an accident. It's about building a world, instead, where the story you want to tell makes sense. Seanan McGuire's Rosemary and Rue tells the story of a half-elf changeling named Toby. In its world, fairies are nocturnal. So it's easiest for Toby to work the night shift. And as a result, the way she lives at the beginning of the book is really working class and gritty. But I don't know that that's the logic that McGuire followed when she was writing this novel. I think it's just as plausible, in a lot of ways more plausible, just to think, oh, McGuire wanted to write a story about a working class down-on-her-luck heroine. So one way of doing that is having her work the night shift. Like, that'll instantly signify that to everyone. And that meant it was sensible to make fairies nocturnal in the world of the Toby books. A lot of the time, tickets are presented to engineering teams as decontextualized gray blobs. Add this bit to this other bit, build this new thing. The team isn't terribly involved in creating the world of the product with the PM. The team might barely understand the world the PM is trying to create. A lot of the time, we as engineers even buy into this by obsessing over ticket construction and definition and estimation rather than focusing on what it is we even want to build at the end of all of this. When we focus on what we want to build at the end, when we focus on what capabilities we want to create on our team, in our code for our end users, then these stories stop being big gray blobs. They have the context of everything else, and we can play around with how and when we put them on the page. We can start in with a sketched-in but good enough world, and gradually make it more detailed in only the necessary ways. Next, let's talk about the plot and pacing of books, and how we can and can't apply those lessons to engineering projects. Let's start with can't, actually. The most classic Western plotting structure is a little like a roller coaster. Think about your average disaster thriller. Everything just gets more and more high stakes, and then Will Smith does something tremendously heroic and unexpected, and everything de-escalates. The audience experiences catharsis, and then they go to the bar and have a few beers. But let's talk about what this would look like in a software project context. This is kind of parallel to a sprint demo, right? We code frantically all week, right up to the wire, and then it's Friday sprint review. We demo our new feature, of course, to the adoring audience of fellow engineers, PMs, and business stakeholders. And the demo goes perfectly, yay! We deploy the feature to the production, and then we go to the bar and we have a few beers. Okay, like, maybe 2 or 3 of you have actually lived this fantasy on a regular basis, but I haven't. Maybe I just don't do Agile right or something. Or maybe something about this fantasy is broken. So how can we change the structure around to create healthier narratives in our software projects? The core of any story is conflict. People want to witness fictional conflicts. If I tell you that a legendary swordsman and an equally legendary pirate are going to have a duel, you totally want to know who wins. You will totally watch them quip and do unrealistic but cool-looking fencing tricks for like a solid 15 minutes in order to find out who wins. And then afterwards, when they have a reunion and team up with a legendary wrestler to go fight an evil prince, you have both resolution of conflict and more conflict. And so you have this carrying on of the story. You carry that line through the entire thing. For the purposes of this talk, we're going to talk about plot and pacing as a set of strategies that authors use to turn a set of conflicts and the resolutions of those conflicts into a useful narrative. Note that when I talk about conflict in this context, I'm not really talking about interpersonal conflict. Person versus person is just one of their classic literary conflicts. And if you want to think more about it in the context of software teams, I recommend Amy Newell's talk on the virtual track in this conference. Today, I want to talk about another type of conflict, one that software projects generate an infinite amount of. Person versus environment. And we're here by environment, we mean computers and our own past decisions and the processes that surround us, and all of the other stuff that goes into the socio-technical system we're living in. We are definitely versus all of that stuff on the regular. The most useful system I've learned for organizing different types of literary conflict is called the MICE system. This system was originally created by Orson Scott Card, who I do have to give props as being the author of many classic science fiction novels that got me through middle school, but who I also have to give anti-props because he was the author of many, many homophobic essays that made me cry as a queer teenager. The version of the MICE system taught to me is a variation that was further refined by the author Mary Robinette Kowal. I can recommend her work unreservedly, thankfully. Probably the calculating stars is the best place to start. Think Hidden Figures, but the women get to go to space instead of just doing math about it. Anyway, MICE stands for milieu, inquiry, character, and event. Each of them describes the ways that a conflict can be introduced into the story, and the ways that that conflict needs to be resolved for the story to feel complete to a reader. If you use people have entered a strange world as the main plot driver, then the plot resolves when people leave the strange world. If you use a mystery to grab the audience, you've got to solve it, unless you're J.J. Abrams and you have enough money that you can piss your audience off. If your main character is dissatisfied with their life at the start of the book, then by the end of the book, they have either adapted that life or done something to change it. And if some big disruptive event happens to kick off the plot, like, say, a meteor crashing into the Earth and kickstarting climate change, then by the end of the book, folks need to have figured out some solution to that situation, like, say, starting up a really cool space program to colonize the moon. Of course, most books include multiple of these plot strands. This is good. But in order for readers to feel like the plot has resolved, you need to resolve each of them in turn. It's like HTML tags, as Mary Robinette taught me. You open a thread, you need to close it. Now, there isn't a great one-to-one mapping of MICE categories to deal with the conflicts we face as software developers, but for the sake of this talk, let's subdivide the person versus computer conflicts that we deal with day to day into other categories. Feature conflicts begin when a user has an unmet need and end when the user can meet that need. Bug fixes begin with improper application behavior and end when the application behaves. Refactors begin with code that is difficult to work with and end with code that is easy to work with. Hardening begins because there's some security or performance problem that creates risk, and it resolves when that risk has been managed or eliminated. Now, proper Kanban style would have us work on one thing at a time. But in practice, software development work just isn't quite that neat. We will start in on a feature and then discover that data is stored in the database in this weird way that means the feature is going to crash everything when we deploy. So first we refactor and do a migration to make sure that we pre-harden. And then in the course of building this feature, another related feature will look like low-hanging fruit, but then it won't be low-hanging fruit because this is weird edge case, and so we need to go a nesting level deeper to do that bug fix. We probably track things a lot more linearly in Asana or Jira or whatever, or at least I hope we do to keep our managers happy. But the actual mental processes, they're not so much one thing at a time, and that's okay. Well, it's okay unless we're doing roller coaster scrum and sprinting to get stuff done for the demo. Because then, well, we're going to spawn a lot of these little new plot threads for ourselves, but we're going to be so consumed by making sure the demo goes well or the feature goes out by deadline, we kind of don't resolve all of them, or most of them, or any. We promised to ourselves that we're going to take some time to clean up, right? We'll promise really hard, but then it's sprint planning Monday, and well, that's a very full schedule this week, isn't it? Oops. And the only way out of the cycle, of course, is to actually take the time to close threads. But we don't need to completely change our process and pretend time pressure doesn't exist. If we're doing that, we're still centering the idea that a software project's story is ever going to be completely done. It's not. This is like a comic book. We want like 50 more issues, infinity more issues. So we accept that our story is kind of going to be messy and endless and weird. That's fine, as long as it keeps progressing, as long as people keep on wanting to pay us for it. So we do things a little out of order sometimes, and that's okay. The only alternative is a project like this. And that's because the way refactor plot threads open isn't someone starting to refactor. It's the code being hard to change. The way bug fix plot threads open in our heads isn't someone trying to fix the bug. It's the bug existing. These plot threads will start piling up in our heads the second we notice the problem. Eventually, they become hard to track. And then they become demoralizing. Who has that column in Trello where bugs go to die? Anyone? Yep. Folks feel like the plot isn't progressing when this happens, no matter how many features they're shipping. A negative feedback loop is in place. People feel incapable of the face of code, and that's always a self-fulfilling prophecy. But this situation is easier to change than you think. Just close one thread to start. You don't need to get everything at once. Pick a thread to pull on and do something. Like maybe delete some factories that no one's using anymore. Because now the narrative in your head is that you're doing things, even if it's just for 15 minutes. Maybe you go and ship a feature next, sure, but it happens to be in the same part of the code as the bug you notice next week, so you can fix that at the same time. The point isn't to fix everything all at once. It's just to get into the habit of fixing little things and encouraging your teammates to take the time to fix little things too. When you set that example for everyone, big things become smaller. The narrative becomes that things are possible again, and that your code is something you get to change, that your environment is something you get to change. When you change your narrative, your environment, your code, your everything will change eventually, I promise. When you change your narrative, you are adding the capability to change code to your team. And that's the most important one to add. Next, let's talk about character development. According to the best hiring research, developers are shaped like potatoes. Specifically, really weird-looking potatoes. Because software development skill isn't a linear thing. It's not like if you know all the algorithms, you're a brilliant developer, and if you don't, you're not. Some people are great at algorithms, some people are brilliant at CSS, some people love React, some people want it to die in a fire. I'm team second. Everyone's a little different. So all that best hiring research is about finding the right shape of potato. Or the shape of your radar chart, because this was much easier to build. It didn't require hours of Photoshop. Developers' professional growth is about growing this out. A lot of models of character development, both in literature and in ordinary capitalism, are quite individualistic. A person goes on a journey and meets a bunch of people who are basically plot devices and levels up and saves the world. It's inspiring and moving, but it's not something I want on my software teams because I don't want people fighting over who gets to be the main character. So for an alternate character development structure, let's turn to romance novels. In a typical romance novel, there are actually usually 3 main characters. A typical modern dual point of view romance novel treats 3 characters' growth with equal seriousness by treating the relationship itself as its own character. The 2 main characters grow and change, and their growth causes the relationship to grow and change, and the relationship's growth drives more personal growth into 2 main characters. It's really heartwarming, like wonderful pandemic reading. And in that context, let's talk about stretch projects. We usually think of stretch projects as being nice things for individual developers so that they can get a chance at promotion. That perspective wastes almost all of the potential that stretch projects have to benefit the whole team. Stretch projects are about growing a team's capability. They're about giving the team as a whole a technical or other skill it does not currently possess, so it can apply that skill in more contexts than just that first stretch projects. Or sometimes they're about introducing a new piece of infrastructure, a little robot character, if you will, that catapults your team's capabilities to another level. They're about adding new Lego shapes to your team's toolbox. Framing stretch projects as being about team capacity, rather than being about individual abilities, changes how folks go about them. A lot of the time, a single developer on the team will handle the bulk of the research and planning and get a disproportionate amount of technical growth. Of course, if they earn a promo from that, that's wonderful. I don't mean to knock that. But if everyone is thinking about it as a team project the whole time, it changes how the team goes about the project. The person who's taking the lead on the project will spend more time pairing and sharing knowledge. They won't feel like they need to do everything themselves to earn the promo. They won't feel compelled to hoard their learning. And similarly, their teammates will insist on doing small bits. They'll actually read the documentation the lead developer writes. They might even look at PRs in strange languages and libraries with an eye to understanding them, rather than an eye to saying LGTM to get out as quickly as possible. Maybe. Now, when doing stretch projects, it's important to go at a reasonable pace. Both Zuko in Avatar and Kylo Ren in the new Star Wars have redemption arcs. And most people like Zuko's redemption arc a lot better than they like Kylo Ren's. The difference is that Zuko's redemption arc is gradual. He sinks in a lot of time and hard work. So when the rest of the good guys accept him, it feels earned and makes sense. It's not a case of, wait, why are they kissing now? Successful stretch projects are rooted in an area the team knows well, but add 1 or 2 curveballs. These skills can be obvious concrete technical skills, like a new database or framework, or rooted in subtler or more abstract techniques, like migration planning, safe refactoring, or user interviews. Note that rolling out a skill across the whole team also counts as a stretch project, because what matters is not the skill of any individual developer. It's about the team as a whole. If you follow these guidelines to make stretches safe and pick the right skills to stretch on, namely skills you can immediately feed back into the next project, you can get away with making as many as half of your projects stretch projects, which really helps everyone on the team grow fast. No more than half, though. People don't actually like to work at the limits of their abilities all the time, and so schedule and morale start to suffer if that's happening. Finally, and briefly, let's talk about editing. When editing, authors look at every given scene and ask if it's moving the story forward in multiple ways. If it's only advancing the plot, only telling you something specific, something new about a character, or only doing one thing in general, then it's not doing enough. It needs to be combined with another scene or removed. And that's because unless you're George R.R. Martin, your publisher has given you a target maximum word count. And as software engineers, we also can't get away with whatever timeline the last Game of Thrones book will be released on. So similarly, we need to always be killing 2 or more birds with one stone. The biggest trick in roadmap planning isn't any of these individual things, world building, plot, pacing, etc. It's about aligning these narrative needs with the narrative to make a larger narrative of the whole product, of the whole team. And the biggest way to do that is just make sure you're advancing your team's capacity in some way with every project. It can be a small way, but it needs to be consistent. I'd like to dedicate this talk to my old team at LTSE. I stepped down as their manager just a few weeks ago because being an engineering manager in a pandemic is a hell of a thing. The tricks in this talk aren't just gimmicks. Among the other things, they're tricks that I used, along with these 6 amazing humans, to go from a world where LTSE didn't have any organizational capacity for data science or infrastructure engineering, to a world where we're capable of supporting innovative financial systems research against largely free text data sources. In our spare time. That's not even the team's main project. None of these folks were trained on NLP formally. And we got there in less than a year. In the Ruby community, clap for them, y'all. They did the work. In the Ruby community, we have this glut of incredible early career engineers who just need a chance. But so much of our narrative is about mentoring them, rather than about building teams where they can shine. If you take one thing away from this talk, take this away. If you build a world where your team's capacity is constantly growing, where everyone on the team is constantly learning from each other and building each other up, it doesn't really matter what level of any of them came in at. They're all going to be amazing. We have 30 seconds, so probably no questions. Come find me after. I don't want to keep you all from cake. Thank you all for your time.